Hello Internet and welcome to this day in history for the 1st of October. Where are we right now? Well, we are in 1908. We are in 1908 specifically because this was the first day that the Ford Model T car was released to the public. And, of course, anyone with any degree of interest in just car history would find this an interesting day, but for the rest of us it also has some fairly interesting consequences. Now, whatever else Henry Ford's flaws, and they were many, he was at least a visionary when it comes to car making, and he was, in fact, to a certain degree, a visionary when it came to freedom, in a certain degree. Let me quote him here for a second. "I will build a car for the great multitude. It will be large enough for the family, but small enough for the individual to run and care for. It will be constructed by the best materials, by the best men hired, after the simplest design that modern engineering can devise, but it will be so low in price that no man can make a good salary and will be unable to own one, and thus enjoy with his family the blessings of hours of pleasure in God's open great spaces." While this is, of course, to a certain degree corporate speak, it does strike at the heart of what made the Model T Ford so very popular, and what has, in fact, to a certain degree, made the car itself so very popular. The car, of course, was invented in Germany and was probably sort of really popularized in several places at the same time. The Austin 7, of course, the people's car in Great Britain, had a lot of influence, but the Model T was the first real car for the middle classes, the car that was available to everyone, the car that everyone could get a hold of, and with that get the freedom of movement. If there is one thing beyond stuff like freedom of speech and right to own property that really defines freedom, it's freedom of movement, the ability to go beyond your most immediate neighborhood and actually move out into the world and see that and enjoy it. Of course, the Model T Ford was also the car that was first, to a certain degree, mass-produced by a semi-automated process regarding conveyor belts, etc., 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 which allowed it to be constructed quickly, fast, and, of course, fairly cheap, which allowed the middle classes to get it. But again, as I said, it was a car that was designed for the middle class. It allowed the middle class for the first time to, well, move into the world as the upper class have done before, and created the middle class mobility and social mobility to a certain degree that it has up until now enjoyed. Of course, everyone knows Henry Ford's comment that the public can have any color they wish as long as it was black. However, that is, of course, somewhat of a misnomer, since in the first 6 or 7 years of its production run, the Model T Ford could not actually be had in black. It could be had in stuff like green or gray or whatever, just not, amusingly enough, black. That's just a small anecdote. Black or not, the car was popular enough that in 1918, 10 years after its initial production, more than 50% of all cars on the streets of the world were actually Model Ts. No car before or since have achieved any kind of market share like that. It's worth noticing that it was so popular that none other than a Mr. Clyde Barrow, the Clyde from the famous Bonnie and Clyde, actually wrote a personal letter to Mr. Ford to praise the Model T for its reliability and its strong engine and decent handling, and just how pleasant it was to drive, especially when you were trying to escape from the police after a robbery or something similar. Perhaps not the immediate testimony Ford had been looking for, but at least it shows that the Model T Ford had a certain amount of appeal to all layers of society. And with that, we end this discussion of this day in history for the 1st of October. The Model T Ford, the car that popularized mobility and just the car as a transport vehicle for the average man. I hope this have been of interest to you, and until the next day in history, I have been the Sage, and I wish you all a very happy day.